Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Dill, who runs the state of Alabama, not only going into 2025, but hey, who's going to be running the state over the next couple of years? I think it's one of the more intriguing storylines that you see in the college football landscape where, look, make no mistake about it, at least from a talent acquisition standpoint, from a roster building standpoint, Hugh Freeze and Auburn have drastically closed the gap. Now, what does it look like over the next couple of years? That's the conversation I want to get into. Now, a couple of different lenses. One, let's talk about what these two teams have done on the recruiting trail. Let's talk about the coaching staff that's in place for both of these programs. And we're going to round the sucker off with just, hey, head-to-head roster battle. Who's got the better football team on paper heading into 2025? Fired up to get into this one. Before we do it, as always, Auburn fans, Alabama fans, let it fly in the comment section. At some point during this episode, at least I know I will. I'm going to tick off some Auburn fans. I'm going to tick off some Alabama fans. That's kind of the beauty of this kind of episode. Would love to hear from y'all in the comment section. Go at it with each other as well. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Dill, when you talk about, all right, what does the trajectory of this rivalry look like over the next couple of years? One of the things you have to look at is what it looks like on the recruiting trail. And this is what any program, if you want to look at, hey, what's it going to look like over the next couple of years? Look at what they're doing at the high school ranks. This is the biggest storyline to me. Auburn is closing the gap from a talent acquisition standpoint, not only at the high school ranks, but what they do in the transfer portal as well. You look at this Auburn roster from a talent standpoint, this is a team that can compete at the highest level of the SEC, which is not something we've been able to say for Auburn for a really long time, especially in the Brian Harsin days where it was a disaster in terms of talent acquisition. The thing that stands out to me the most is what it looks like in the state. Still in the 2025 class, out of the top 15 players in the state of Alabama, 9 of them are going to take their talents to Auburn. Out of the top 15 players in the state of Alabama, how many are going to Alabama? The answer is 0. If you are an Alabama fan, if you're a Kalen Deboer, does this, I'll just say this, how much does it bother you going into this 2025 year?
Not a ton yet. And I mean, if I'd be more bothered, frankly, if they didn't recruit a top 3 class. So it's like, obviously, it wasn't an aggregate problem in terms of their recruiting ability, because that's a team, or that's a class, I should say, that can win you a national championship. So it's not a problem yet. But I will say, I don't think most coaches just say it for to pay a lip service, if you will, when they say we want to recruit our backyard really well. It's a priority for guys like Kirby Smart or Steve Sarkisian at Texas, certainly a huge priority for Brian Kelly down in LSU. So I think in the next few years, you'd like to see this be a more competitive state where Alabama is landing guys from the state. Because, again, I think going into these first couple cycles, maybe for Deboer, Hugh Freeze probably does have an advantage. He's been recruiting in the state for a couple of years now, has been able to build these relationships over a longer period of time. But if it doesn't change, then I'll probably get a little bit concerned, even if they still keep their recruiting nationally well. Because, again, I don't think coaches just make this up out of thin air. That it's
not you want these kids from Alabama coming to play for Alabama. If you're Kalen Deboer, there's no secret about that. If there's one knock I would give to Auburn on the recruiting trail, and it's hard to knock them because they're doing a much better job, probably at the quarterback spot. Hank Brown was Hugh Freeze's guy when he came over to Liberty. Now Hank Brown's at Iowa. And then you bring in a guy like Walker White, where there was a lot of optimism about Walker White being the guy for the next couple of years. Now he goes to Baylor. If you're an Auburn fan, doing a really good job on the trail. You want to see them recruit their quarterbacks from the high school ranks, get them developed, and go win football games with them. Deuce Knight is that quarterback that you were looking for. And I don't know if it's going to be this year. I don't even know if it's going to be in 2026. You are looking for better high school pipeline development from the quarterback spot.
And if it doesn't happen for Deuce Knight, that's probably where you get your questions of how are you going to sell this to the next guy? Because Deuce Knight has the talent to be a good enough player to go get drafted and be a big-time player.
And even a guy like Jackson Arnold, where I look at it and say, you put a Ferrari caliber offense around him, you got to see him put it together so you can start selling to the quarterbacks at the high school ranks. Look, we're going to put a good offense around you, and we're going to develop you as a quarterback to go out and win a lot of football games and be really productive. A really big year for the quarterback playing.
You kind of saw his ability to do that at Washington really kind of manifest quickly, where right when he goes to Alabama, he hits the ground running, gets a big time quarterback this first class he hits. So again, Kalen Deboer, I think his proven track record of working with quarterbacks and getting them playing at a really high level, I think you already see that showing. Now, the thing that impresses me about what he's doing is he's recruiting the trenches really well, like much better than he was able to recruit at Washington. And that was always going to be the question. Like, I think everybody knew he'd be able to get skill into that Alabama program because you knew he could really probably sell himself to wide receivers, quarterbacks, offensive skill weapons. But his ability to recruit really high-level offensive linemen along with guys on the defense side of the ball.
Four blue chip offensive linemen for Kalen Deboer in the 2025 class. And I'll give Hugh Freeze credit too. 5 blue chip defensive linemen for Auburn in the 2025 cycle. Both these programs doing a nice job recruiting the line of scrimmage, which is huge. We talk about it all the time.
Looking at the sides of the ball that probably didn't play good enough. Like you look, I don't think anyone thought that was a talented enough Auburn defensive line for the past couple of years. And you see guys like Keldrick Falk coming along, but I don't think you got exactly what you want. And it didn't look like that type of SEC room. Now it kind of does. And same with Alabama. I don't think that offensive line probably played well enough. You go out and land a big-time class of really talented players, just looking at the kind of deficiencies in the program and kind of getting them fixed pretty quick.
You got to get we say it all the time. Get the line of scrimmage right, because that's the one thing you can't address in the portal. It's very hard to – you can miss on some wide receivers and go grab some in the portal. You can't do that at the line of scrimmage. Coaching staff. To me, Ryan Grubb coming in for Alabama is huge. Yeah. That duo between Kalen Deboer and Ryan Grubb, it might be the most powerful duo that we see in the country when it comes to coaching offense. That's huge for Alabama. And I'll say this, I ain't necessarily sold on the defensive staff. Yeah, I got to see something in 2025. For Auburn, I know you are probably going to criticize the offensive staff and the lack of, like, hey, who's the guy that's developing quarterbacks and calling the plays? I get that. I will say this. This finally feels like the offseason where Hugh Freeze is comfortable with his coaching staff. You know, the first couple offseasons when Hugh Freeze came in, obviously hiring a new staff, and then after the 2023 year, it was like a revolving door. It's like brand new staff comes in. To me, going into year 3, it finally seems like Hugh Freeze has found the coaching staff that he likes. That continuity is going to matter to me in 2025.
Yeah, I just think I'd like to see a little more clarity of who's kind of responsible for the offense at the end of the day, because it feels like it's always been flip-flopping from Hugh Freeze. Offensive
I think a lot of Auburn fans.
I would like to, again, I think probably the same issues arise in the Florida offense. Now, again, there might be some clarity, but I don't think most Florida fans would prefer that their head coach is so stuck in his ways and stubborn about calling plays. So I think that's probably one thing I look at. Like, again, they just need more consistency from that offense. Again, it starts with the quarterback for sure. I think the fact that you didn't really get much improvement over the past couple over the past 2 years.
I'll give Hugh Freeze a slide on that. What are you going to do with Dill? We're Michigan fans. We know what Payton Thorne's about.
See, but he did enough for Michigan State to win some games now. Like, again, that was a little bit of a unique situation where I think Michigan hadn't quite ascended to where they were going. Some other teams, the Big Ten, were maybe a little bit down.
The lack of
you didn't get any progression from it.
Yeah, that's probably fair criticism. All right, let's quick take on the trajectory. And look, you can say, hey, I like where both programs are going. I think that's a fair answer. I will say this. What Auburn is doing and how they're marrying the high school ranks with the transfer portal and building slowly a roster that going into year 3, this went from, let's be frank, like one of the least talented rosters that we saw in 2022 and in 2023 when Hugh Freeze first took it over in 2023. I'll look at going into 2025 and say, holy smokes. So this is a roster that legit can compete at the highest level of the SEC.
With that, the excuses are up. Now they got to win probably 8 games, or else I'm going to be being like,
agreed.
Well, okay, yeah, it's all well and good that you can recruit, but at the end of the day, recruiting needs to manifest itself. And again, I'm not saying they need to go win a national championship, because I still look at it's a pretty young team. There are some spots that I think they're still kind of building out to being deep enough where you need it to be. So they don't need to dominate college football, but they need to be a probably upper tier SEC team for me to kind of be comfortable with where.
I guess where I'd say it is if it ain't gonna happen with this roster, is it ever gonna happen? Are you ever gonna put it together at Auburn? I think that's where a lot of Auburn fans sit with Hugh Freeze going into 2025. But at the very least, you put yourself in a spot to compete at the highest level. When's the last time you could say Auburn has the roster to do so? It's been a while. Alabama, it's like, look, was it necessarily expectations for Kalen Deboer year one? No. Was it probably foolish of us to expect no growing pains going from Nick Saban?
Yeah, but those were probably a little worse than growing pains. I mean, though, like losing to Oklahoma in the way they did, and just not feeling remotely prepared for that game, losing to Vanderbilt. God, that I don't know if that's ever happened at Alabama. Like those type of games, I think you're again like I'm frankly not totally sold on either of these programs and either of these coaches. I still I look like there are some things about both of them, like Auburn. Like, I think last year was talented enough to probably win some of the games that they lost. In Alabama, like again, I know there was turnover, and I'm hearing some of the things come out of guys were allowed to be late to workouts and some.
I'm not buying that. That's crazy.
It is like if that was happening, that is kind of crazy.
No, I think
again, those things you look like. Well, does that manifest? Like Alabama was a talented enough team to be better than what they were on the field, be better than what they showed against a team like Michigan, who was down a couple of starters.
The biggest concern for me was like when Nick Saban was like, you kind of knew what you were going to get. This team was going to be prepared every single Saturday. That for Kalen Deboer year one, it was like there were some games where it was like, did we even game plan? Like especially
Jalen Milroe kind of gave those type of performances under Nick Saban too, where there were some games where he'd play at a really high level, and then you'd turn on the next game and he'd give you a really weak one. So that was a little bit of a Jalen Milroe thing too. But again, like that defense playing the way they did against Oklahoma, that defense playing the way they did against Vanderbilt, like there were other issues than just Jalen Milroe that again I'll probably want to see cleaned up this year if you're going to really totally buy into where Kalen Deboer is going to take this team.
All right, let's get into the main event. We're a little late, 12 minutes in. Hopefully people are still checking the boys out. Quarterback position, Dale. I'll start. I'm going to take Alabama here. And it's one because you got three guys that I mean, like I had Kalen Russell starting in 2020. I think he's that guy. I also have a lot of confidence with Austin Mack. That was a handpicked guy from Kalen Deboer. You have a lot of confidence with Ty Simpson too. But most of all, as we sit right now heading into 2025, I have more confidence as of right now with Kalen Deboer finding one of these quarterbacks that can play at a high level than what I saw with Hugh Freeze, where my biggest concern is, hey, can we get our quarterbacks playing at the necessary level? For that reason, I am going to take Alabama with the caveat of I am very intrigued to see what Jackson Arnold looks like in this Auburn offense that is loaded around him.
Yeah, and I think why I'd probably lean Bama too is like you have the same questions about both rooms. I don't think you have anyone who's proven to be a really high-level college quarterback yet. You have a ton of talent in both of them. I mean, Jackson Arnold, we know how good he is. Deuce Knight, obviously super talent. And then you got Kalen Russell. And Austin Mack, to me, is kind of the X factor because he's the guy who he came over with Kalen Deboer from Washington, obviously has that kind of built-in trust. And then he's stuck around. So that makes me think like I'm interested to see you. I know you say Kalen Russell. I am very interested to see if Austin Mack can kind of be the guy and be Kalen Deboer's first like Alabama quarterback, let's say.
Well, I think the better chance is Kalen Russell being Kalen Deboer's first Alabama quarterback. Running back, I think you got to lean Alabama just because you know what you have with Jam Miller, with the caveat of I am extremely high on Jeremiah Cobb. But Jam Miller, proven production.
I feel like you sleep on Jam Miller. I think Jam Miller is a really good, tough physical runner. Like, is he wildly explosive and is he going to put a Heisman season up? I doubt it. But he's a really good, solid running back. And then the guys.
Well, it's just more like let's not pretend like the standard isn't like elite running back play at Alabama. Yeah, like that's more what I mean. And it's not a knock on Jam Miller. So we've seen some really freaking good running backs at Alabama. Wide receiver room. This is probably going to get into like the first like hot takey conversation. I'm going to go Auburn here. Dill, I think we'd be if Auburn had better quarterback play, I think we'd be talking about Cam Coleman in a very similar way we talked about Ryan Williams after his true freshman year. Maybe not being 17 years old, but being a really good true freshman. Eric Singleton, to me, is arguably top 10, not even, I think he's top 10 wide receiver in the country going into 2025. You have what I think could be the best wide receiver duo in the country, along with like Horatio Fields. A lot of people are high on him coming from Wake Forest. Perry Thompson going into year 2. Malcolm Simmons, just a difference maker with the football in his hands. You have Ryan Williams at Alabama. I think you have some really solid ones in Jeremy Bernard and Isaiah Horton. I just think you got one just as high of a ceiling with this Auburn wide receiver room, but also just a little bit more proven commodities in that room as well. I'm going to go with Auburn.
Yeah, and that one's tight because I think both have that like real dominant number one, like Cam Coleman and Ryan Williams. I think the way they both played as true freshmen, like, I mean, you love what you have. One guy, and I probably would lean Auburn for the reasons you said. I think it's just a deeper room with a little bit more talent. But one guy I'm kind of looking at who could I think flip this a little bit is Jalen Hale. Like Jalen Hale before I think he broke his leg, right? Like
yes,
before that injury was really coming on, and I think he can give you a little bit what Kendrick Law you almost would have wanted to give you, but with a little bit more polish, like really good with the ball in his hands, can be used in more creative ways in the Kalen DeBoer, Ryan Grubb system. He's the guy I'm kind of looking at, like, can he go complement what Ryan Williams, Jeremy Bernard, and Isaiah Horton are kind of doing for that team and be that really premier kind of slot guy?
Another entry, Jalen Mbakwe. I heard there's some buzz around him making the transition. He's like when that kid committed to Alabama, is like whatever position he decides to play, he's going to be very good at. Offensive line, I think you have to go with Auburn here. This is probably the biggest concern I have for Alabama is like the development on the offensive line was just not great. Like Caden Proctor did not take the step I expect. And it's not saying he was bad. Like Elijah Pritchard on the right side was just downright not good. Caden Proctor was not bad, but I thought there was going to be a bigger step from him going into year two. You don't really backfill the tackle. I think Wilkin Formby is going to be the starting tackle on the right side. And the fact that when he played, it wasn't great, and he didn't really play over Elijah Pritchard, who really struggled, that concerns me. I like the inside of the offensive line, but for Auburn, I feel like there's less big glaring question marks about the offensive line. Xavier Chaplin, I think, an all-conference caliber tackle, which allows you to finally put Dylan Wade where you want to put him at left guard. Connor Liu, great center. Because of the lack of question marks, I'm going to give the nod to Auburn here up front.
And that's fair because I look at the thrthree spots with Proctor, Brailsford, and Roberts. Like Roberts might be the best offensive lineman in this whole conversation. I think he is a monster at guard. Brailsford, I think, played and fit better than I even thought he was, frankly.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, I agree with that.
He played really good for them. And then Caden Proctor, you are right. Like, there's still some, like, can he be more consistent and more steady? But
that's the thing. Like,
that is the tough part because, like, you've seen really good and you've also seen some.
I hate having glaring question marks at tackle going into it, especially in
the you have, I think, two huge ones at right tackle. And then Cam Dewberry, to me, he's not really.
I think Michael Carroll might start.
Sorry,
I'm interrupting.
You're right. So it's like, again, I do look at Auburn probably with just fewer questions and more guys, I think, in aggregate that you're comfortable playing.
Defensive line. You have question marks for both. I think the question mark for Alabama is like, who's going to be the difference maker? Who's going to be the Will Anderson? Who's going to be the Dallas Turner? Who's going to be the guy that it always has felt like Alabama has had that can wreck games? Auburn, I think you have that with Keldrick Fall, quite frankly. But then Auburn, it's like, do we have enough depth and proven commodities on the inside of our defensive line? Like, you might have to be playing a couple of true freshmen significant snaps on the inside in a depth role. I'm going to give the lean to Auburn because I think I'm freaky high in Keldrick Falk, and I'm also very high in Amaris Williams. And so I'll give the nod to Auburn, but I don't feel great about it. I think you have question marks for both of these units going into spring practice.
I'd probably go Bama for the simple fact I think on the inside there, I'm in a much better spot with them. I look like, again, James Smith. Yeah. James Smith is really good. I feel like people don't talk about him enough. Tim Keenan, you know exactly what you're getting at. Just a big physical player on the inside. And then Beeman and Hill, I feel a little bit more comfortable with those guys as being your kind of depth pieces than I maybe do. Like, again, like you got some real talented freshmen coming in. Dallas Walker's a fine player, I think, from Western Kentucky, but like, is he a really premier, like a really good depth piece in that middle? I don't know. I think they're a little bit more complete at Alabama. The huge question is who of those three guys, Keon, Qua, and Yanza, who's going to step up and play really good football?
That's
his thing. One of those guys needs to start playing better ball.
That's the question I have too. Like, can one of those guys be the difference maker that Alabama's looking for? Because you just didn't have that. That was one of the biggest problems. You just didn't have that guy up front in 2024. Backers, you probably have to go with Alabama just because you know what you have a little bit more. very high into Marcus Riddick. It's a young, inexperienced room where you look at Deontay Lawson, we know he's one of the best backers in the SEC. Nikhai Hill-Green, guy that's really starting to play some good football towards the tail end of his career. And then Justin Jefferson as well. Let's get into the secondary because I think this is the most fascinating. You went Auburn, I'm pretty sure. I'm going to go Alabama. The reason I'm going, and this is not a shot at Auburn secondary last year was really good. They have a lot of young talent coming back. The ceiling for Alabama is so high in the secondary. Now, was it a very consistent, complete unit in 2024? No, it wasn't. You had a transfer in Damani Jackson. You had a transfer in Keon Sabb. You had a true freshman in Xavier Brown. Man, Xavier Brown takes a step. Damani Jackson takes a step. Keon Sabb takes a step. And then you have a ton of true freshmen. Dejon Lee being the guy I love the most. That certainly can play as a freshman. I'm betting on the ceiling a little bit. The smarter picks, probably Auburn. But give me all that talent in the secondary, and I think they'll be able to figure it out there.
See that? What's a little crazy to me is you're talking ceiling. Like Auburn's really talented there too. They got some good young players coming in, like Anquan Fagans.
Yeah.
I look at guys like Kayan Lee and Jay Crawford, two young players who I just like. They've been playing better football at the end of the day than I kind of look at where Alabama's been at. I think they were both young units last year. I just think Auburn was further ahead. And then I look at the safety spot. That's where I think you have a huge advantage for Auburn because those two young players in Smith and Harris, I mean, they're monsters. I think they both have high ceilings. I just think Auburn's further ahead. I think they played better football last year. And again, yeah, Alabama's ceiling as a secondary is awesome. Like they could be really, really a great unit. But they were not a good unit at all last year. I need to see it before I buy full in, and I think we saw more of it from Auburn.
Yeah, I was surprised your argument did not start with the safeties because I am extremely high
it's
on Kalen Harris.
Those two are just big, athletic, physical safeties.
Yeah, really good.
Be really
all right. That's good. You can't argue that the gap's closing. Can Hugh Freeze put it together in 2025 is really the biggest question here. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll talk to y'all later.